I was kicked out of my family so they could spoil my golden child sister. Now I'm a self-made millionaire, and they're begging me to fix the family business she ruined. My parents called, desperate. They needed me to save their family business, the one they'd gladly let my sister, Sophia, drive into the ground. The old house felt the same, even through the phone line, thick with a need I'd spent my whole life trying to escape. Growing up, I quickly understood that their love came with serious conditions. Sophia got praise just for existing, while I practically fought for every crumb of acknowledgement. It wasn't about who was smarter or more talented. She was simply born first, and that, somehow, made her worthy of everything. My parents, Eleanor and Robert, ran a decent logistics company in Seattle. Robert had started it 20 years before I was born, locking in contracts across the Pacific Northwest. Eleanor handled the admin, the books, the client relationships. Together, they built something steady, profitable, but honestly, pretty unremarkable. Sophia was 4 years my senior. As far back as I can remember, she was always the center of attention. Her trophies? Framed, right there in the hallway. My accomplishments? Tossed into some drawer, probably buried under old bills. When she made honor roll, we'd go out to the fanciest restaurant. My straight A's? They just got a quick, distracted nod from Eleanor over her morning coffee. Everything clicked into painful focus when I turned 12. Sophia was 16, fresh with her driver's license. Robert bought her a shiny, nearly new Honda Civic, complete with leather seats and a sunroof. I stood behind the living room curtain, watching them presented to her in the driveway, a giant red bow draped over the hood. She shrieked, jumped, hugged them both. I was completely invisible. 2 weeks later, I asked about Saturday art classes at the community center. They were $90 for an 8-week session. Eleanor barely glanced up from her laptop. "We just bought your sister a car," she said flatly. Money doesn't grow on trees. The injustice seared through me, but I shoved it down, like always. That summer, I babysat for everyone, saving every single dollar until I could pay for those art classes myself. No one in my family ever asked where I went on Saturday mornings. They were too busy at Sophia's volleyball tournaments in other towns, trips that somehow never strained the budget. High school just widened the chasm between us. Sophia glided through mediocre grades, maximum social popularity. She joined every club that asked for basically zero effort, fluffing up her resume with titles that sounded important but meant nothing. Secretary of the drama club? That was 2 attendance sheets a month. Vice president of student council? Show up for pizza and homecoming votes. I threw myself into academics. It was the only place I could truly compete, the only place I felt seen. Chemistry fascinated me, the magic of elements combining, transforming. I'd spend lunch breaks in the science lab, running extra experiments, badgering my teacher with questions far beyond the textbook. Junior year, I took 3rd place at the state science fair for my water purification project. My parents showed up for the awards ceremony, but left before the reception. They had an important client dinner. Sophia got into Washington State University with totally average SAT scores and an essay I'm pretty sure Eleanor heavily edited. The celebration? An entire weekend. Robert popped champagne, invited relatives over for a spontaneous party. Aunts and uncles I barely knew fawned over her like she'd just cured cancer. I was 15, standing in a corner, watching my own future vanish into thin air. When my time came, I applied to 11 universities. I'd worked myself ragged, keeping a 4.0 GPA while balancing 2 part-time jobs just to afford the application fees. Caltech accepted me with a partial scholarship. Harvard offered a bit more financial aid. I also got into UCLA, University of Chicago, and Columbia. Each acceptance letter felt like a validation I'd been desperate for my entire life. I showed the Caltech letter to Eleanor and Robert one Tuesday evening in March. They were just sitting there, watching TV in the living room, Robert with his feet up, Eleanor glued to her phone. I held the paper, my hands shaking slightly, waiting for even a tiny flicker of the excitement they'd shown for Sophia's acceptance to Washington State. Robert barely glanced at it, maybe 5 seconds. "That's nice, honey," he mumbled. "Pretty far from home, though." Eleanor's response hit harder. "How much is this going to cost us?" "Your sister still has 3 more years of tuition. The scholarship covered about half. I'd need loans and work-study for the rest. I can take out student loans," I explained. "I'll work on campus." Robert just shrugged. "Those loans are yours, but you'll expect us to bail you out when you can't make payments." His eyes were already back on the sitcom rerun playing on screen, canned laughter echoing in the void where their pride should have been. I applied for every single grant and scholarship I could find. I wrote essays until my eyes burned and my fingers cramped. By the time graduation rolled around, I'd pieced together enough funding to make Caltech a reality, without asking Eleanor and Robert for a single dime beyond their meager, expected contribution. That summer, Sophia came back from her freshman year with unimpressive grades and huge plans to major in business. "I'm going to take over the company someday," she declared at dinner one night. "Robert's been teaching me all about the industry." This was news to me, but it really shouldn't have been. Of course, they'd been preparing her for succession. She was the chosen one, the golden child who couldn't possibly do wrong, even when she did everything wrong. "What about you?" Robert asked me, his tone more obligation than actual curiosity. "What are you studying again?" "Chemical engineering," I replied, for what felt like the 10th time. He nodded vaguely. "That's nice, though I don't know what you'll do with that out here. Not much call for engineers in the logistics business." The message was crystal clear. The family legacy wasn't for me. That honor belonged solely to Sophia, despite her complete disinterest and lack of real aptitude for the actual work. She loved the idea of being a boss, having a title, an office. The messy reality of freight schedules and contract negotiations? Zero appeal. That August, I left for Palo Alto. Eleanor and Robert drove me to the airport, but they didn't walk me to security. "Call when you land," Eleanor said, her hug quick and distracted. Sophia didn't bother coming at all, she was sleeping off some party. That flight felt like finally shedding a skin I'd outgrown years ago. Every mile between Seattle and San Francisco was a piece of freedom I'd fought so hard for. I leaned my forehead against the airplane window, watching the clouds below, and thought about how tiny my old life looked from up there. Caltech was brutal, yet absolutely beautiful. The coursework pushed me like nothing ever had before. Most nights, I'd study until 2 a.m., fueled by coffee and sheer willpower. But for the very first time, I was surrounded by people who actually valued intelligence and hard work. Professors knew my name. Classmates sought out my input on projects. Here, I mattered, in a way I never had at home. Sophomore year, I landed an internship at a pharmaceutical company in San Francisco. The work was all about optimizing chemical processes for drug manufacturing, exactly the kind of puzzle that lit up my brain. My supervisor, Dr. Clara Sutton, really took me under her wing. She saw potential in me beyond just technical skills. "You have business instincts," she told me one afternoon, as we looked over efficiency reports. "You see the bigger picture, not just the chemistry." That stuck with me. I started tacking on business electives to my engineering requirements: finance, operations management, entrepreneurship. The combination felt incredibly powerful, like I was building a toolkit that could unlock doors I never even knew were there. I still called home every few weeks, just because it felt like the right thing to do as a daughter. The conversations were utterly predictable. Eleanor would ask if I was eating enough. Robert would give quick company updates. The rest of the time was all about Sophia's latest achievements. She joined a sorority, became social chair of something, started dating some business major whose dad owned a car dealership. My own accomplishments? Barely a blip. When I mentioned making the dean's list, Eleanor just said that's nice before immediately gushing about Sophia's new boyfriend taking her to some fancy restaurant. My research paper got published in an undergraduate journal, and Robert's response was a distracted good job, followed by a long complaint about rising fuel costs eating into profit margins. Junior year, though, brought the internship that changed everything. A tiny biotech startup in Mission Bay hired me for their product development team. They were only 6 people, with this incredible patent for a new water filtration membrane. The pay wasn't great, but they offered equity. I jumped at it, no hesitation. There was just something about the scrappy energy of a startup that grabbed me, far more than the corporate stability of Big Pharma ever could. These people were literally building something from nothing, and they wanted my help. The company was called AquaPure Technologies. Our CEO, Julia Vance, had actually left a tenured position at Harvard to commercialize her research. She was brilliant, demanding, and utterly focused on results. I absolutely thrived under her leadership. Most students want safe internships at name-brand companies, Julia told me during my first week. Why did you choose us? Because safe is boring, I told her. I want to build something that matters. She smiled. Good answer. I worked 30 hours a week, all while carrying a full course load. Sleep? Totally optional. My social life was basically study groups and the occasional quick lunch with classmates who were just as obsessed with their work as I was. I didn't mind the sacrifice. For the first time in my entire life, I was building something that belonged solely to me. That summer after junior year, most of my classmates scattered to high-paying internships at big tech or consulting firms. I stayed in Palo Alto, working full-time at AquaPure. Julia had secured our first round of funding, and we were absolutely racing to get our first product to market. My role expanded from intern to junior engineer, with actual, real responsibilities. We launched in September of my senior year. Our filtration system was designed for developing markets where clean water was unreliable. The technology was elegant, affordable, truly life-changing. Orders started as a trickle, then a flow, then a flood. Julia offered me a full-time position after graduation. The salary was modest, but the equity? Substantial. You've been essential to this company's success, she told me. I want you here for what comes next. I graduated with honors and moved into a tiny apartment in Berkeley. Eleanor and Robert? They didn't come to the ceremony. Robert claimed he couldn't leave the business, and Eleanor needed to help him. Sophia was studying abroad in Greece, a program they somehow found money to fund. I walked across that stage alone, collected my diploma, and felt nothing but a huge wave of relief. These people had no claim on my success. I'd built all of this completely without them. AquaPure took off, faster than anyone expected. Within 18 months, we were in 12 countries. 3 years later, a major international corporation acquired us for an amount that made Julia cry when she called me. My equity? Just over $2 million. I was 25, suddenly wealthier than I'd ever dreamed. At first, the money felt surreal, like it might vanish if I stared too hard. But it was real, it was mine, and I'd earned every single penny. I bought a condo in Palo Alto, big windows, hardwood floors. Hired a financial advisor, invested smartly. Donated to causes I deeply cared about. And my family? I told them absolutely nothing. They still thought I was just some junior engineer, scraping by somewhere, if they thought of me at all. Our phone calls had become quarterly obligations. I knew bits and pieces of their lives from Facebook posts and Eleanor's occasional texts. Sophia had graduated and immediately taken a position at the family company as Director of Strategic Development, a title that seemed to mean attending meetings and doing very little actual work. The business, though, was clearly struggling. I could read between the lines of Robert's vague updates. Competition was fierce. Profit margins were shrinking. Long-term clients were jumping ship for cheaper options. But hey, Sophia was there now, so everything would be fine, right? I started my own company when I was 27. That acquisition left me with capital, connections, and a whole lot of confidence. I'd spotted a huge gap in the market, sustainable packaging materials that could actually compete with plastic on price. My chemistry background and business education converged perfectly for the challenge. I named the company Catalyst Solutions. We developed a biodegradable material from agricultural waste, something that could be mass-produced. The science was intricate, but the value proposition was simple: save money, save the planet. Finding investors was surprisingly easy. My track record at Aquapure opened every door. Within 6 months, I'd raised $3 million in seed funding. Within a year, we had our first major client. 18 months later, we were profitable. The company grew steadily, intentionally. I hired meticulously, choosing people who shared my values and work ethic. We built a culture of innovation, accountability. No golden children here. You contributed, or you left. My first key hire was Isabella Rossi, who'd spent 15 years in manufacturing logistics. She understood the real-world challenges of scaling production in ways I was still learning. We'd sit in the conference room for hours, mapping out supply chains, identifying bottlenecks before they even became problems. She never once questioned my age or experience. Results were the only thing that mattered. We hit our first $1 million in revenue on a rainy Thursday in March. The whole team, all 9 of us then, crammed into our small office with cheap champagne and huge optimism. Isabella toasted to building something meaningful. Our lead chemist, Daniel Kim, made everyone laugh with awful jokes about molecular bonds being stronger than our coffee. I looked at these people who'd taken a chance on my vision and felt something I'd never once felt with my biological family: belonging. The growth just exploded. By year-end, we'd tripled our revenue. Major retailers started calling us. Industry publications featured us, talking about our sustainable materials shaking up traditional packaging. I did interviews where journalists were actually interested in my story, my ideas, my future. Nobody asked about my family or where I came from. They only cared about where I was going. Sometimes, during those early victories, I'd almost call my parents. Some lingering instinct told me they'd want to know their daughter was succeeding beyond anyone's wildest expectations. But then I'd just scroll past their number, remembering the cold indifference that had met every achievement of my younger years. Why would this time be any different? They'd chosen their favorite child. My success existed completely outside their narrative. By 30, I'd built a company worth $20 million. We had clients all across North America and Europe. My personal net worth climbed past $8 million. I lived comfortably, never ostentatiously, just a practical Toyota, regular clothes. The money itself mattered less than the freedom it gave me. My family would cross my mind sometimes, usually late at night when work quieted and my thoughts could finally wander. The anger had mostly faded, replaced by something closer to indifference. They made their choices. I made mine. We lived in separate orbits now, and that felt exactly right. Then, one Tuesday in October, my phone rang. Eleanor's name. We hadn't spoken in nearly 4 months. "Hi, Eleanor," I said, keeping my voice carefully neutral. "Sweetheart, I'm so glad I caught you." Her tone was unnaturally bright, and it instantly put me on guard. "How have you been?" "Busy with work." "You?" "Oh, you know, same old, same old." A beat. Actually, that's not entirely true. Things have been challenging lately. I waited, letting the silence hang. She wanted something. It was so obvious. "Robert and I were hoping you could visit soon. We'd love to see you. It's been so long. I'm pretty swamped right now. Maybe during the holidays?" The thing is, we were really hoping you could come sooner. There are some family matters we need to discuss. Important ones. Her voice cracked on those last words. What kind of matters? Another pause, even longer. It's better if we talk in person. Can you come this weekend, please? The sheer desperation in her voice tripped old wires in me. Despite everything, some deeply buried part of me still reacted to my mother's distress. I'll see what I can do. I booked a Saturday morning flight, refusing to dissect why I was actually going. Maybe curiosity. Maybe I wanted to prove a point. Or maybe I was just tired of running from people who had never even bothered to chase me. The house was exactly as I remembered. Same beige siding, same overgrown shrubs by the front door, the same lopsided mailbox Robert had promised to fix for a decade. I stood on the sidewalk for a second, took a deep breath, then walked up the path and knocked. Eleanor opened the door instantly. She'd aged so much, it was a shock. Her hair was mostly gray, yanked back in a messy ponytail. Deep lines edged her forehead, framing her mouth. She looked utterly exhausted, a tiredness that went beyond physical. You came. She pulled me into a hug that lingered far too long. Thank you for coming. Robert appeared behind her, looking just as worn out. His shoulders slumped, his face a pale, grayish color. Come in, come in. Can I get you something to drink? The living room was a mess, something it never used to be. Stacks of papers covered the coffee table. File folders spilled off the couch. Everything felt dusty, neglected, like they were too overwhelmed to even keep up appearances. We sat in an awkward triangle, them on the couch, me in the armchair opposite. The silence stretched, heavy, until I finally broke it. So, what did you need to talk about? Eleanor and Robert exchanged looks. He nodded to her. She nervously twisted her hands in her lap. The business is in trouble. Serious trouble. We're looking at bankruptcy if we can't turn things around in the next few months. I kept my face carefully neutral. I'm sorry to hear that. How did it get so bad? Robert cleared his throat. Multiple factors. Industry changes, new competitors with lower prices, some bad strategic decisions. We've been losing clients for the past 2 years. What does Sophia say about all this? I asked. She's your director of strategic development, right? The silence that followed was deafening, telling me everything I needed to know. Your sister means well, Eleanor began carefully. She has a lot of passion for the company, but she's struggling with the operational complexity, Robert admitted, cutting her off. Some of her decisions have actually made our problems worse, not better. I didn't need him to elaborate. I could vividly picture Sophia's time at the helm. Expensive choices based on superficial analysis, chasing trendy strategies she didn't understand, surrounding herself with sycophants. The same charisma and baseless confidence that made her popular in high school? Catastrophic in an executive role demanding tough decisions and brutal honesty. What kind of decisions? I asked, my curiosity piqued despite myself. Robert shifted uncomfortably. She invested heavily in expanding our fleet just before fuel costs skyrocketed. Signed long-term contracts at rates that looked competitive, but totally ignored market fluctuations. And she let go of experienced operations managers, replacing them with unqualified friends from her network. He sighed. Each decision seemed fine on its own, but together, they created a domino effect, a cascade of problems we just couldn't recover from. The entire picture snapped into painful, agonizing focus. Sophia had been given authority she hadn't earned, and responsibility she couldn't possibly handle. Eleanor and Robert had actually set her up to fail by refusing to see her limitations. And instead of correcting course when the problem started, they'd probably just enabled her even more, making excuses, hoping everything would magically fix itself. How long did you let this go on? I asked, before admitting there was a problem. Eleanor's eyes welled up. We kept thinking she'd grow into the role, that she just needed more time and support. We didn't want to undermine her confidence. Translation: they prioritized Sophia's feelings over the company's very survival. The same pattern from my childhood had finally destroyed their business, coddling the golden child while reality burned down around them. I leaned back, letting it all sink in. So, you put her in charge, and she drove the company into the ground. That's not entirely fair, Eleanor protested weakly. The industry has been challenging for everyone. Where is she, by the way? I pressed. Why isn't she here for this conversation? Another heavy silence. She's been under a lot of stress, Robert interjected. The pressure has been difficult for her. She's taking some time to focus on her mental health. Translation: Sophia had buckled under a weight she was never ready for, and my parents were left scrambling with the wreckage of their broken company. So, why am I here? I already knew, but I needed them to say it. Eleanor leaned forward, her eyes pleading. You're smart, you're successful. You understand business. We thought maybe you could help us figure out how to save the company. Help you how, exactly? Come back and work with us, Robert said. Help us restructure, find new clients, turn things around. This is your family, your legacy, too. The sheer audacity took my breath away. For 30 years, they'd treated me like an afterthought. Poured every resource into Sophia while I scraped by. They'd made it crystal clear I had no place in their precious legacy. And now that Sophia had failed, now that their golden child had proven to be made of tin, they wanted me to save them. My legacy, I said, keeping my voice utterly even. You told me there was no place for me in this business. You said my education was useless for logistics work. We were wrong, Eleanor cut in quickly. We see that now. You've done so well for yourself. We should have supported you more. What exactly have I done so well? I asked. What do you even know about my life? They exchanged confused glances. You're working as an engineer somewhere, right? Robert ventured. Somewhere? I almost laughed. You don't even know where I work. You've never asked about my career beyond the most superficial questions. You have no idea what I've been doing for the past decade. Then tell us, Eleanor urged. We want to know. We want to be part of your life again. You want to be part of my life now that you need something from me, I countered. That's different from actually caring about me as a person. Robert's jaw tightened. That's unfair. We've always cared about you. Really? Prove it. I challenged him. Tell me one significant thing that's happened in my life in the past 5 years. Just one thing that mattered to me. They stared at me, blank. Eleanor opened her mouth, then closed it. Robert looked away. You can't, can you? Because you never asked. You never cared enough to know me beyond the bare minimum required to maintain the fiction that we're a family. We made mistakes, Eleanor said, tears welling up. We can admit that. We prioritized your sister when we should have treated you equally. But we're trying to make amends now, by asking me to save your business. That's not making amends, I shot back. That's using me. We're not using you, Robert protested. We're asking for your help. There's a difference. Is there? I asked. Because from where I'm sitting, this looks like the same pattern that's played out my entire life. Sophia gets all the attention and resources. I get called in to clean up her messes. Except this time, the mess is catastrophic, and you need more than I'm willing to give. I stood up. I was done. This visit was a mistake. I should have trusted my gut and stayed away. Please don't go, Eleanor cried, her voice breaking. We need you. If we lose the business, we lose everything. The house is mortgaged. Our retirement is tied up in the company. We'll have nothing. You should have thought of that, I said, before you put someone unqualified in charge just because she was your favorite. Robert's face flushed with anger. Sophia is not unqualified. She has a business degree. A degree she barely earned from a mediocre program, I retorted. I have a degree from Caltech and an MBA from Wharton that I earned at night, while building a successful company. But you don't know that, do you? Because you never bothered to ask. The shock on their faces might have been satisfying if the whole situation hadn't felt so pathetic. You have an MBA from Wharton? Eleanor whispered, stunned. And I own a company worth more than yours ever was, even in its best years, I clarified. I'm doing fine. Better than fine. I've built a life and a career that have absolutely nothing to do with you. And I did it entirely on my own, because you made it perfectly clear I couldn't count on your support. I walked toward the door. Eleanor followed, grabbing my arm. Please, I'm begging you. Don't let pride destroy this family. I pulled my arm free. I'm not destroying anything. You did that years ago, when you decided one daughter mattered and the other didn't. You're just finally facing the consequences of your choices. So, you're going to abandon us? Robert demanded. Let us lose everything out of spite? I'm not doing anything to you, I stated. I'm simply declining to save you from the natural results of your decisions. You chose Sophia. You invested everything in her. That was your choice. And now you get to live with the outcome. I left them standing in the doorway and drove straight to the San Francisco airport. There was an evening flight back to Palo Alto. I bought a ticket and sat in the terminal, my hands still trembling from the adrenaline. Within an hour, my phone started ringing. Eleanor, Robert, then even Sophia herself. I declined every call, then just turned my phone off. Whatever they had to say, I didn't need to hear it. The next few weeks brought a barrage of messages. Voicemails from Eleanor, crying about how much they loved me. Emails from Robert, detailing their dire financial situation. Texts from Sophia, swinging between apologies for being the favorite and furious accusations of my cruelty. The cruelty accusations were especially rich. I was cruel for having boundaries. Cruel for refusing to sacrifice myself to save them. Cruel for not forgetting 3 decades of neglect the moment they decided they needed me. After the first week, I blocked all their numbers. My therapist, Dr. Evans, had been helping me process family trauma for years. She'd prepared me for exactly this kind of manipulation. They're trying to rewrite history, she said during our next session. They want you to believe your pain doesn't matter as much as their current crisis. But your feelings are valid. The way they treated you is wrong. You don't owe them rescue. Part of me still felt guilty, I admitted. They were my parents. They were going to lose everything. They made choices that led to this outcome, she reminded me. You didn't create this situation. You're not responsible for fixing it. She was right. Intellectually, I knew she was right. Emotionally, though, the guilt still gnawed at me. My entire childhood, I'd been conditioned to believe my needs came last, that prioritizing myself was selfish. Unlearning those messages was, and still is, hard work. 3 months went by. I threw myself into my company with an almost fierce intensity. We landed a huge contract with a British supermarket chain for all their packaging materials. The deal? $40 million over 5 years. My company's valuation shot up to $60 million, practically overnight. I bought a house outside San Francisco with a stunning view of the water. Hired a housekeeper and a personal assistant. I started saying yes to social invitations I'd been turning down for years. My life expanded into places I'd been too busy, or too wounded, to explore. And then, a letter arrived. From an attorney representing Eleanor and Robert. They were suing me for financial support, claiming I had a moral and legal obligation to save them from bankruptcy. The suit was absolutely frivolous, guaranteed to fail. But the sheer audacity of it left me breathless. If I wouldn't help willingly, they'd try to force me through the courts. It was so perfectly, predictably them that I almost laughed. When manipulation failed, they just resorted to threats. I hired the best lawyer in San Francisco, Marcus Thorne. We filed a countersuit for harassment and emotional distress. We built a case, compiling evidence of their decades-long pattern of favoritism and neglect, meticulously documenting every instance of them prioritizing Sophia while leaving me to fend for myself. That legal process forced me to dig up memories I'd worked so hard to bury. Marcus Thorne, my lawyer, was methodical and surprisingly compassionate as we built the case. He had me write down every single moment of differential treatment I could recall. It was therapeutic, in a strange way, transforming those vague feelings of unfairness into concrete documentation of systematic neglect. Like in 8th grade, when I won a regional writing competition, and Eleanor and Robert missed the awards ceremony because Sophia had volleyball practice, not even a game, just a Tuesday practice. Or my 16th birthday, when they cancelled the small dinner I'd requested because Sophia got dumped and needed their emotional support. Then there was my Caltech graduation, where I walked across the stage with honors, and no one from my family was there to see it, because attending would have been inconvenient. We found old report cards. My straight A's got zero special recognition, while Sophia's mediocre B- average came with enthusiastic praise notes from them. We compiled financial records showing thousands spent on Sophia's sorority dues, her study abroad program in Greece, her new car, while I was told we couldn't afford $90 art classes. The pattern was undeniable, laid out chronologically, in black and white. Marcus was blunt during one of our preparation meetings. Your parents are going to claim they loved you equally, that these are just normal family dynamics. But the evidence, he said, gesturing to the stack of documents, shows systematic deprivation of resources and emotional support. This isn't sibling rivalry. This is parental favoritism that bordered on neglect. Hearing it spelled out so clearly by a neutral third party, it validated feelings I'd spent years questioning. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I imagined the disparity. Maybe I was making too much of normal family imperfections. But no. The pattern was real. The damage was real. My pain was absolutely justified. The legal battle dragged on for 6 months, draining what little resources they had left. Marcus absolutely demolished their case in mediation. The judge strongly suggested they drop the suit and take responsibility for their own financial choices. They lost. The business closed. They filed for bankruptcy and sold the house. Last I heard, Eleanor and Robert moved into a small apartment. Sophia got an administrative job at a dentist's office. The golden child, tarnished beyond recognition. When I heard the news, I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not guilt, not even sadness. Just a vast, echoing emptiness where my family used to be. They'd made their choices. I'd made mine. This was simply the inevitable conclusion of a story 30 years in the making. My company kept growing. We expanded into Asia, setting up manufacturing facilities in Malaysia and Indonesia. I hired a CEO to handle daily operations, freeing me up to focus on long-term strategy and new product development. At 34, I was wealthier, more successful, than I ever thought possible. I also started dating someone who truly saw me. His name was Liam, and he ran a non-profit focused on clean water access in developing countries. We met at a conference, connecting instantly over shared values and complementary skills. He knew absolutely nothing about my family, which was incredibly refreshing. With him, I was just me, not the unwanted daughter, not the vengeful sister. Just me. Our first real date lasted 7 hours. Coffee turned into lunch, which turned into a walk along the Golden Gate Bridge, ending with dinner at a small Italian place in North Beach. He talked about the communities he'd worked with in Uganda and Peru, the complex challenges of sustainable development, the delicate balance between helping and imposing Western solutions. I told him about the chemistry behind our biodegradable materials, the deep satisfaction of solving problems that truly mattered, the unexpected joy of building a team that felt like family. "You light up when you talk about your work," Liam observed over the tiramisu we were sharing. "It's not just a career for you. It's proof," I heard myself say, surprised by the honesty. "Proof that I could build something meaningful from nothing. That I'm capable, valuable, and worthy of success." He studied me with those careful brown eyes. Proof for who? The question hit me harder than he knew. For myself, mostly. And for the people in my life who made me feel like I'd never amount to anything special. Building this company proved them wrong. "Their loss," Liam said simply. "Anyone who didn't recognize your value from the beginning is an absolute fool." 6 months into our relationship, I finally told him about my family. We were at his apartment in Mill Valley, cooking dinner. He was chopping vegetables, I was stirring the sauce. The quiet domesticity felt safe enough to finally be vulnerable. "I haven't spoken to my parents in over a year," I said, watching the sauce simmer. "They tried to use me after spending my entire childhood treating me like I didn't matter. When I refused to save them, they sued me." Liam stopped chopping. "They sued you?" I explained everything then, the golden child favoritism, the differential treatment, the business collapse, the lawsuit. He listened without interrupting, his expression moving from shock to understanding, then a quiet anger on my behalf. "I can't imagine how much that hurt," he said when I finished. "How much it still hurts." "The weird thing is," I told him, "it doesn't hurt anymore. It just feels empty. Like there should be grief, but there's nothing there." He pulled me into a hug that felt like coming home. "Maybe that's healing," he whispered. "Maybe letting go looks like emptiness before it becomes peace." Sometimes I still wonder if I should feel worse about how it all ended. Society tells us to honor our parents, support our family, forgive and forget. But those platitudes assume a reciprocity that my family never offered. You can't withdraw from an account where nothing was ever deposited. Eleanor and Robert made me feel worthless for 30 years. They taught me love was conditional, and I never met their conditions. They chose their favorite child, expecting me to accept my role as the disposable one. And when their favorite failed, they expected me to swoop in and fix everything, as if decades of neglect could be wiped clean by a single conversation. I chose differently. I chose myself. I built a life where I'm valued for who I am, and for what I contribute. I surrounded myself with people who truly see me, appreciate me. I created the family I needed, instead of constantly begging for scraps from the one I was born into. The business they destroyed? I could have saved it. I had the resources, the expertise to turn it around. But saving it would have meant rewarding their behavior, teaching them that treating me like garbage for 3 decades had no real consequences. It would have meant putting their needs above my own dignity, just like I'd done my entire childhood. I refused, not out of revenge, but out of pure self-preservation. I finally understood that I deserved better than people who only valued me when they needed something. That realization? Worth more than any money or family approval. My life now is rich in ways that have nothing to do with my bank account. I have work that challenges me, colleagues who genuinely respect me. I have a relationship built on mutual admiration, not obligation. I have friends who chose me because they wanted me in their lives, not because we share DNA. This is what I needed all along. And I had to build it myself, because my family simply couldn't, or wouldn't, provide it. They thought I owed them rescue because we were related. I thought I owed myself peace because I'm human. We were both right, from our own perspectives, but only one of us had spent decades earning that worldview. They asked for help they never gave me. I said no because I'd finally learned I was allowed to. That's not revenge. That's just consequences, finally catching up after years of being delayed. They wanted a successful daughter they could be proud of. They had one all along. They just didn't notice her until they needed her. And by then, it was too late. Some things, once truly broken, can't be fixed with apologies and desperation. Some relationships just don't survive the crushing weight of sustained disregard. I sleep fine at night. Better than fine, actually. My dreams are ambitious now, not anxious. I wake up excited about the day ahead, rather than dreading obligations to people who never truly cared about my happiness. I've discovered that living well isn't the best revenge, because it isn't revenge at all. It's just life, finally lived on my terms. The golden child, Sophia, failed because she was never prepared for reality. I succeeded because I had no choice but to prepare myself. Eleanor and Robert created these circumstances when they decided one daughter deserved everything and the other deserved whatever scraps were left. I simply stopped accepting their valuation of me and created my own instead. Sometimes, the best thing you can do for people who've hurt you is let them experience the full weight of their choices. Not to punish them, but because rescue would only enable the patterns that damaged you in the first place. They needed to learn what I had to learn, that actions have consequences, and nobody is coming to save you. You save yourself, or you don't get saved at all. I saved myself. They're welcome to do the same. I hear Sophia is learning accounting now, and maybe she'll rebuild something from the wreckage. I hope she does. Honestly, her failure wasn't my victory, because we were never truly in competition. We were just two daughters who deserved equal love and attention. She got it. I didn't. And now, we're both living with the results of that fundamental imbalance. This story doesn't have some tidy, perfect ending, because life doesn't work that way. Eleanor and Robert are struggling, and probably will be for years. Sophia's reputation is damaged in ways that will take a long time to repair. And I'm thriving in a life I built from absolutely nothing, because nobody handed me anything else. We all got exactly what was coming to us. That's not revenge. That's just truth, finally catching up. Sometimes, I wonder if the biggest lesson wasn't about them, but about me finally learning to value myself. What would you have done?